Okay, so I'm about to start building Geo's face, and I'm using Paul from the photo shoot a couple chapters back. I'm going to use Paul as a base reference. Um, I'm going to use his photos to get the likeliness, but then afterwards we're going to just deviate a little bit. But at least we need some form of grounded reference so we can have a little bit of realism. So here we're looking at an eyeball, and what I'm doing is I'm just going in and drawing out the eye. And whatever techniques you may have as far as going about starting a face, it's perfectly fine as long as when you finish, all your loops are clean and no triangles on visibly on the face, just as clean as you could get it, and having the likeness of the person you're trying to model. Okay, when it comes to modeling a human face, besides getting the likeness, which you could do at the end, as far as topology, there are certain areas that are pretty much always the same. And one area is the loops around the eyes, the loops around the mouth is a different area, and where the ears meet connects with the face. As far as the nose, that's left up to interpretation. I've seen the loops around the nose done a lot of different ways. So what we're doing is we're gonna extrude these edges out a little bit more, and we're just gonna do that until we get just enough edge loops running around the eye. And the whole point of this is that later on, once we have our face and we start doing morph targets, we have enough loops for deformation. So when we go ahead and we have to make this eye blink or close the eye or squint or any kind of facial animations, we have enough loops going around the eye to do that. Now, we don't want to throw too much in there. That just makes it a lot harder to control once we're moving stuff around. So for now, we're just gonna keep it simple, and then later on we could always add or subtract depending on what we need. So we're gonna go ahead and extrude one more time. And as far as tear ducts, we'll come back in later on and add those in. So right now we're just trying to get the basic, just a basic feel of an eye in there. There are a lot of different approaches when it comes to modeling a human head. Usually, what I would do is I would take a cube and I would then shape it to look like what I'm trying to model and just keep adding details until I get to a decent amount of res. Then I would go in and cut the eyes out, cut the mouth out, the ears, and just go in and just work with that from there. For the most part, what I'm doing right now is I'm just taking a more patched approach. So, as I said earlier, when it comes to the eye, because it's so contained, you know pretty much on any character you're building, the loops around the eyes are always going to be similar in the same respect. They're always going to be loops running around the eyes, and same thing for the mouth. You're going to have your loops going all the way around your mouth, and this is just always the same because it's just necessary in terms of doing any form of facial animation afterwards. Um, so what we're gonna do is we're just gonna start extruding these edges outwards. And next we're gonna work on the nose after we move from the eye, then the mouth, and then we'll get in the face and then move on to the ear. So for whatever face I'm building, I generally tend to put usually you have a couple of areas where you have these stars or these areas where four or more edges meet. And what it does is it just changes the flow of the geometry, but it also affects how the geometry looks after you've added a smooth node. So one area that there's this star is right underneath the eye, and usually where I place that is right on the inside of the eye socket. So when we go ahead and add a smooth node to this, it gives the impression of just a cheekbone. So you get the impression of a cheekbone sitting underneath the skin. Okay, so we're just gonna start moving some verts around and making sure that we're getting the shape roughed in. And we're gonna come back later on and make sure everything lines up after we have the entire head. But so right now we're just making sure it looks semi decent. There's a few problems right now. Tear ducts, um, too flushed with the eyes and nose. We could push that back a little bit further in, and once we start duplicating over, we'll get a better idea of what we need to move around. So we're just trying to get all the um, natural areas out. Let's push this back in so we get a little bit of thickness in the eyes. Okay, see what it looks like. So right now, our bridge of our nose is too wide in between the eyes, so we could take those in and just continue from there. Okay, let's delete this and continue. Okay, so this is actually nowhere close to the amount of loops that we're going to need around the eyes in order to make an eyelid whenever we smooth this and whenever we're going to add facial shapes. But right now it's just we're trying to keep it simple, and we'll go back in and just add more later on. So let's extend this down. And the thing with building a face is once you build once you build a proper face with good loops, it's all the same after that. So it doesn't matter what approach you're using in order to get the face. You kind of have an idea what it's supposed to look like when you're finished. A good thing to do is whenever you come across any opportunity where an artist shows their wireframe for their face, go ahead and save that image and save as much of these images as possible. What that does is later on you have a collection where you can just go ahead and compare the differences between wireframes, and you can see why some artists do different loops around the nose or around the mouth or around the eyes, and just go ahead and kind of check it out, see which version you think is best, and eventually you'll end up with a loop flow of your own. Now there's no real wrong, but there are better topology layout that I've seen in the past. So as long as it's simple and neat and facial animation friendly, then it should be fine. So we're gonna go ahead and just isolate this nose area. And as I said, there's just a lot of different techniques in going about doing this, and however you may feel comfortable with, that's fine. As long as when you're finished, the silhouette is okay and everything is just as simple and neat as possible. Clean topology lines and just accurate attention to detail. Okay, so right now we're just laying the groundwork for the base form, and later on we're gonna come back in and just basically we're just gonna add loops and make sure we're getting that form in. So right now the most important part is the base, and that's what we're building. So notice we're trying to keep this as simple. We're not trying to add a lot of geometry in here or a lot of loops. Just trying to keep this as simple as we can. And once we get everything fleshed out, then we could go back in. So you could pretty much get in your eyes and nose, mouth, and ear, just build a character. Once you have your basic topology down, then you could go in and then add characteristics. Um, Most important part is, well, actually, they're equally important. You have to capture the likeness of what you're modeling, but you also have to make sure that your topology is ran in a way that when we get to doing a facial animation, you're not going to have any problems. So what we're doing right now is we're just going to build in a face with their loops that are correct, and then we're going to just get the likeliness of character, likeness of geo. So we're gonna try to avoid any areas where we have the topology running along too close to each other. And if it is running along kind of close to another edge, we're going to just make sure that when we smooth it, you don't get that poly creasing that you usually get in some models. Okay, so we taken out the harsh line that we had in there, but we're still far from what we want to do. Okay, so right now we're using Paul as a reference, but we're also changing some of his features. Paul has a slightly different nose and just different contour. We're still using him for the basics, but we're just changing around. We're keeping his around his eye and eyebrow area. Maybe we keep a little bit of his cheek and jawbone and ears, but we're changing the nose to match what Peter had drawn earlier. Okay, so let's continue fleshing this head out. So let's bring up a photo of Paul. So as you can see, we're using Paul as reference. We're still changing actually quite a bit of his features, but we're still using him as the underlying reference. Looking at nose, distance to eye, mouth, just generic human features. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and just continue to expand this head. Select the edges around the border and just continue to extrude all the way back until we get to the mouth area. Now, as I said before, I have an idea what I'm trying to achieve here, so I know where the loops pretty much should be in the sense of just getting a rough out, so I could always just change it later on, but right now I don't need to have a full head there, so I could do this entirely in patches and go back in later on and change whatever is off, like cheekbones are too flat and stuff like that. I could always go back in and change, but I have an idea where I'm supposed to break the geometry and so forth. So right here we just extruded these edges down. On top of the edges we're leaving an area where the air is going to be in, and we're going to extrude this all the way down, and this is going to be the chin, and we're going to have our mouth go in there. So as I said earlier, it is a little unorthodox, and I usually go about this a different way, but I mean at the end of the day it's all the same. As long as it looks the same at the end, then let's go ahead and try different techniques sometimes. So we got the neck just extruded in. We're gonna go ahead and just save this file real quick, and we're gonna start on the mouth. Seems a little hard trying to, must look confusing just having to get that mouthpiece in there and have it seam up with the rest of the loops. But as I said earlier, there's a couple key parts in the face that are self-contained, and the eye self-contained with the loops running around the eye, and the mouth is one of them. So as long as you make the mouth in there and have that, you could have as much loops running around. You don't have to worry about um, seaming this up. It's actually it's not that hard. So we're gonna go ahead and just draw a simple, using the create poly tool. We just get a simple opening, and I'll show you how to just take this and turn that into a mouth area and seam it up with the rest of the face. So we want 3 vertices at the end because we're gonna have a couple loops going to the corner of the mouth. Right now we're not worried about the shape of the mouth yet. We're just worried about getting in uh, a space that's going to represent the mouth bag. That's going to be the inside of the mouth. So we're going to extrude this, and let's delete this face over here and snap these points to the center line. And once we have that space in there, we could always extrude that in and have that be the inside of the mouth. Okay, so let's do a rough guesstimate of where this should be in terms of where the nostrils are and the chin. And we're gonna go ahead and just eyeball where we think it should be. And then afterwards, we're going to start to let the mouth take shape. Okay, let's merge these. Make sure there's one line in the middle. And we're going to go ahead and just fit that in a little bit better. Let's combine that, and we're going to extrude and start to snap points over there just to fill in this vast space that we have. So once we start filling this in, we'll get a better idea of where we need to add our loops. So we're going to snap the points, and then we're merging vertices right after we have the verts snap together. So we're going to need a couple loops in between here just to continue a couple of these geometry lines. Same thing goes for the bottom. And once we fill the hole, then we could go ahead and start adding more loops around the mouth area to get in the lips, and we could go ahead and even do the inside of the mouth bag. Okay, let's go ahead and save, and we still have this nose area to fill, and it's quite a few lines that we need to have run in somewhere. We just need to get in and just flow all those geometry somewhere. And that's always the tricky thing with changing your topology or laying down new topology is especially across patched areas, you have these edges that need to flow somewhere. So you don't want to just have unnecessary geometry by just could have taken that line and just having it run all the way down into the mouth, but then that's going to be just instead of two edges going down into the mouth towards the front, we would have had three. And the more edges we have together, it's the greater the chance of when we smooth it just to get a undesirable poly pinch. So we're just gonna move these around and just try to keep it clean as possible. Okay, so we're just moving moving some of the loops around, and just flashing in the lips, getting the lip area. And we're gonna definitely come back to this, but just to give you a general idea of just one way of going about it. So we've gotten all our holes filled, and we're just doing some minor adjustments. Okay, so just moving some stuff around. Don't be afraid to just, as I said in one of my previous chapters, just get in there and make a drastic change if you have to see if that's the route you want to go, instead of doing all these minor changes and just to realize that it looked better before. So never be afraid of just going in and making a big move and just undoing it if it's not working. Okay, so right now I'm not too concerned with the neck area. We're gonna go back in and change just change the loops around. This is just to get the face area in, fleshed in, and afterwards we could always revisit this. So right now we have a big gap in the back of the head, so what we could do is just grab these edges and just keep extruding them all the way back until we fill that area, while consciously leaving a space in the middle for the ear. Now, the ear also is a self-contained area, just like the eye and the mouth, where you could build them separately and they could just drop right into the geometry after you're finished. So we're just gonna go ahead and extrude this around, and we're just gonna fill the back. I mean, it's really simple, not too hard. So we're gonna separate the ear right in that hole. And that's where we're gonna just drop our ear in and have it seam up with the rest of the head. Okay, so I went ahead and filled in the back of the head. Usually this area doesn't cause or pose any problems, since you could do that fairly quick and simple. Okay, so I'm going to show you a quick starting point for an ear. We're just going to start with a cube, and we're just going to extrude this around just to get the basic contour of the ear, and I'm going to show you how to attach it back to the head, and then go ahead and start just detailing it a little bit, and then after that you could take it from there. So we're just going ahead extruding just to get the basic shape of the ear. So we're going to continue this until we get all the way around. And we're going to meet it up onto the, not the face at the start point, but the second face. We're going to go ahead and delete that and just merge those vertices. Also, we're gonna just delete the face in the back. All the faces in the back, we're gonna get that out. We don't need any faces back there. And we're gonna fill the inner and outer holes, and then we're just gonna start adding, we're just gonna use the poly split tool and just start adding in some ear detail. Always remember to go back in and delete any unnecessary faces. So right now it just still doesn't, it's not quite looking like what we want it to, but in a couple of seconds you'll see the direction that we're trying to get to. So make sure that the verts on the outer part of the ear are equal number of spans as the area of the head that you're inserting it into, and just go ahead and start moving around. Eventually this ear will start coming together. Okay, let's start getting some more details in here. Okay, so we're just moving around the area, trying to get in that form. We're going to be adding a little bit more geometry to this until we start to see the air a little bit better, a little bit clearer. And we're going to try to keep this as clean and simple, especially now that we're starting. Later on when we start adding in the details, it's going to get a little bit more cluttered. Usually building out ear, you um, ears tend to be a lot more cluttered than any other part of the face, since it just demands so much detail. The shape alone, in order to get the shape, you have to add a lot of loops just to get the intricacy of the human ear. So usually you tend to see a lot of models with either just too much geometry or not enough geometry. So usually you have the ear that just has way too much loops, or you have the ear that just doesn't have enough in order to get that realistic look. So we're gonna try to find a balance point. But so now we're gonna just start splitting around, and we're gonna be just pulling out the intersections while trying our best to keep it as quad as possible. We're just gonna move stuff around until we find a suitable loop in. And we're gonna go ahead and scale this down just a little bit. Let's continue to shape this. Pull this section out a little bit more. And so right now we have uh, area that's generally um, in the it's in a good direction as far as likeness of the air loop wise. Now it's gonna be up to me to go in and just make sure that the all the loops are supported, like the outer area of the air. We're gonna obviously need a lot more loops. This is just the start point, just to get in all the major forms in. So when we go back in and add our geometry to support these forms, we're not just adding the loops blindly. Let's go in and put a hole in here, and later on we'll move it in and fix any any problem areas that we have. So basically what we did was just build a basic kind of a workflow in terms of just getting an ear at a good enough point to then go ahead and start detailing. So let's do a little bit more adjustment and go ahead and just attach this ear to the head. We're gonna start by just deleting these faces on the head. And now let's combine and go ahead and attach this. Okay, so here we have our ear on there, and I mean you can spend as much time as you want tweaking this. So here we went ahead and just added some more loops so that when we take this into ZBrush, we're going to have just a lot more to work with. Same thing goes for the rest of the face for the eye and the nose and the mouth. We just went ahead and cleaned up the geometry, moved around the loops, and just got a lot more detail that we wanted to get into the model. So as far as the eyes, we just added a lot more loops for the mouth and nose also. So this should be good enough for deformation purposes. So the loops are looking pretty decent, and I don't see any problems when we're gonna have to do any facial animation. Okay, so I'm going to be testing a couple of the blend shapes that I did for Spencer, just to make sure that there isn't any major deformation issues or any additive shapes, just to make sure everything's working across all the targets. Spencer's working on a facial rig right now that's pretty much going to call on a particular blend shape depending on Burke's animation. So I'm pretty sure that I'm going to have to do a lot more targets than what I currently have. So, but the main point of this is just to make sure that, the shapes that we have are working together so fine and just for demonstration purposes. So here we have our base head, and we're gonna blend shape our targets onto this and just test out how each target's reacting with one another. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and duplicate this out, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna use this as an additive blend shape. So we're gonna use a existing blend shape that we have. Let's go and grab the eye close, and we're gonna create a squint blend shape. So by invoking our eye close, we're gonna go ahead and just add in an additive blend shape. So we can have another target that, let's say for instance, he closes his eyes, but we wanted to seem that in one case his eyes are closed tighter. So we're just gonna have the feel of him closing his eyes a little bit more. So let's go ahead and create a blend shape, and we're gonna call it Geo Blends, and we're gonna go ahead and turn on the eye close. So just by turning on that blend shape, this is what the eye looks like. Doesn't It works for a simple eye close, but it doesn't work for, let's say, he was trying to convey a lot of pain where his eyes was closed. We need that to just feel a lot tighter. So we are going to go ahead and, while looking at our base head with our eye closed, we're manipulating our new squint shape, making sure that we're not moving the points around too much. If we were to go ahead and do the shape by itself, chances are when we call the eye close shape also, we would probably get some penetration. So a good way of just adding in blend shapes and let them work with each other is just by turning one on and just carefully manipulating the other. So we're just gonna go ahead and make sure we're not pushing these loops around too much. We just need it to just have a tighter feel when the eye is closed. So one of the harder things in doing blend shapes is that you have to make sure that everything works in conjunction with another shape. So let's say we're making this eye squint here, having it work with the eye close. It also has to work with the angry blend shape, and it also has to work with let's say a snarl or a or any shapes that has to do with the around the eye region. So you constantly got to go back and test and make sure that you don't have any conflicting shapes. So right now we have it close in, and we have our range from 0 to 1, where 1 is calling the shape all the way, and 0 is nothing. So maybe we could have the eyes closed and then call in the shape at like 0.5 or all the way. But we just created this squint shape here, so that seems like it's working fine. We could even have the squint without the eye closing. By painting it with the eye closing, we just make sure that whenever the animator go ahead and close the eyes, that we're not going to have any major problems. So we're going to go ahead and also add in a kind of a angry blend shape. So again, we're just testing the fall off region from that blend shape, making sure it doesn't cross over too much onto the other existing blend shapes, or else you'll then have penetrations. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and duplicate this base. So we're gonna create a new target. Let's call that snarl, and that's gonna represent just that puffy cheek area you get when you have a angry expression. So we're gonna go ahead and add that into our existing blend shapes, and by not turning that on, when you edit the mesh, it doesn't affect the actual base mesh. But when you put that to 1, you could edit the mesh while looking at what's going on. So I recommend doing that a lot, since you could turn on any immediate targets that are around that area, just to make sure you're not pushing pushing your geometry too far. So we can just go ahead and to start puffing this area up. This is just real quick. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back once I'm finished with this. Probably gonna get a list of targets that Spencer is gonna need, ranging from not so subtle and a snarl or an angry brow to really subtle shapes like cheek puffed out or not puffed out. So it depends on whatever shapes he sees fit to add into his face rig. So right now we're just moving around this cheek area, and just checking out what it's doing on our base shape with our eye closed and eye squint. And one thing with building blend shapes is you have to really be careful about um, moving too much area around. Like, for instance, try to isolate what muscle groups are affecting what area in the face. So if you're gonna go ahead and do a sad expression, you try to get some reference of what muscle groups are actually moving around, so you're not actually moving around geometry outside of those muscle groups. By doing that, you're just gonna get a more unnatural look. So try to just get an idea of what muscle groups affect what areas. So right now we're just tweaking around, just trying to get a decent look. And you want to also take a keen note on areas that shouldn't move. And these areas are obviously areas like eyebrow. As much as expressive as your eyebrows can be, what's actually happening is you actually have your skin sliding over that area of your skull instead of collapsing that entire geometry. You want to leave the volume there, but have your loops actually move up. So you just have to be careful in just not going in and moving shapes around. You don't want to lose volume in areas that you shouldn't be losing volume. Okay, so by itself it may be a little too harsh, but combined with angry and squint, it seems to be working okay. So you could also build certain shapes in conjunction to be used with other shapes, knowing that we're probably never going to have a snarl where he's not squinting, since um, that's kind of a secondary reaction. Okay, so here's a couple shapes that I did. As I said earlier, these are just the beginning, and it's probably going to be 3 to 4 times more shapes once I'm done. But it's just for Spencer. A lot of these shapes aren't mirrored over to the other side either, so it's going to be quite a few more. So we're just moving some targets around, just testing, making sure that we're not getting any major deformation issues. And it seemed to be working okay for now, but you never know. So let's go ahead and test all your targets in as many different combinations as possible. So one thing is that Geo is going to be smoking a cigar uh, as he approaches the base and Paul's helicopter. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have a couple shapes that could go around the cigar. I'm pretty sure that Spencer is gonna have a couple clusters around the mouth that could also achieve this, but I'm gonna go ahead anyway and just have a blend shape that does that, and that also works in conjunction with the other shapes. So right now you notice, I don't know if you noticed, but there's a point right underneath the chin that was moving whenever I was moving the mouth. I have to go back in there and make sure that whatever target that's on, I just go in and take it out. So always keep an eye out for those stray vertices moving around. A lot of times you build a shape without noticing that there's a vert selected on the back side. So when you start adding in all these blend shapes, then you have like these different areas moving around. But so far it seems okay. I'm gonna get that list from Spencer and just keep working at it and just get as much shapes as I can, and we're just gonna add that back into his facial rig. That's not a real expression, by the way.